Justin the Clue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're doing a very serious topic, and that is guys in gorilla suits.
You know, there are many things that the director John Landis and I might disagree on. For example, the height at which you should fly a helicopter above an actor. However, there's one thing he said that's always stuck with me, which is that if a movie has a guy in a gorilla suit, it's automatically a good movie.
I don't know if I can argue with that because the science proves that it's true, but watching many of the films that we picked this week, I'm like, oh boy.
Well, if they didn't have the man in the gorilla suit, possibly they wouldn't be very good.
You know what I think the issue was with the films that we watched this week, which is we picked the gorilla-centric ones. What we need are comedies that suddenly a gorilla shows up, you know, lifting our spirits. We're just happy to see one of our guys like Crash Corrigan on screen.
But hey, in these bad movies, whenever the gorilla's on screen, aren't you happy?
It's the best.
So listen, Justin and I, when we see a gorilla, a man in a gorilla suit in a movie specifically, we're always really happy. And I think we're talking about a specific kind of gorilla suit. We're talking about movies from the 30s, the 40s, maybe even the 50s, oftentimes B movies, Poverty Row movies, or comedies.
Now, I have something personal to share in this episode, which is I own a gorilla suit. I love the gorilla suit I own, and I use it as much as possible. I actually have two fur suits. One of them that my partner Emily built herself that she sewed together. It is incredibly hot and it's tough to wear. And then one that I got at a dollar store that actually looks pretty nice with a really fancy gorilla mask she got me one year during my birthday, where if you open the mouth, it moves. Perfect. Love using it in sketches.
What is it about gorilla suits for you?
I don't know, because it is not a childhood nostalgia thing, because I do not have those memories of watching those real grimy public domain style black and white films that a gorilla would show up in.
Like The Ape Man starring Bela Lugosi.
But it was at a certain point into my cinephilia that I started noticing gorilla suited performers. And it just tickles me in a odd way that's difficult to kind of grasp onto exactly. But I want to make an attempt, because I do think it is. The gorilla is a kind of force that we know it, and seeing it in comedic situations bumping up against the Three Stooges, there's something funny there, because a gorilla is not inherently comedic. If anything, it is dangerous.
So when you see a man in a gorilla suit in a horror movie from the 30s or 40s, the level 1 reading is that it's kind of so bad it's good.
I can't believe it. They think that this is a gorilla, that people will believe this?
Looks so fake. Come on, guys. And then there's another kind of movie, again, Abbott and Costello, the Three Stooges, where how many scenes have there been where or how many Three Stooges comedies have there been where the Stooges are detectives and they're on trail?
We could even call them ditzy detectives, for example.
Yes, they're on the trail of a burglar who calls himself the Gorilla, and he burgles homes disguised as a gorilla. But who should Curly run up against?
Oh no, a real gorilla.
Uh-oh. And he's like, hey guys, I got that. I can't do the Curly voice like I used to be able to. I got that villain. It's a real gorilla.
Yeah. Why I oughta.
But then by the end of the short, Curly and the gorilla will be friends.
Or like in Ditzy Detective, the gorilla is decapitated and Curly holds up his severed head. But don't worry, the gorilla head goes roar, and then they get scared and run away.
I think there's a Shemp one where Shemp ends up being friends with the gorilla at the end.
Because that's what we want, right? We want the gorillas to befriend the comedic characters, oftentimes taking on the villains. I don't want to see them in villainous roles in the Rue Morgue style, the murders of the Rue Morgue. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert, it's a gorilla that did it at the end.
In the Three Stooges, you look at the man in the gorilla suit, and it's so fake that it's kind of funny, and it adds to the fun. It's like, we're all here, we're having a good time. It's obviously a fake gorilla, but this is not a movie meant to be taken seriously. But in both examples, in both the horror films and the comedies, I think the gorilla, the man in the gorilla suit, is really representative of the magic of the movies. Because whenever we go to see a movie, we are required to suspend our disbelief.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we know that there are cuts. This did not happen simultaneously. We understand at a base level, even if we're not technically minded people, that movies are constructed.
And the man in the gorilla suit really forces us to confront this. And there's also something so childish about the man in a gorilla suit.
Well, it's like dinosaurs, right? Like gorillas, I feel, are like animals that children are attracted to because there's something powerful, especially kids who do not feel like they are in control, gorillas are, because they are big, they are strong, they represent like beasts.
Yeah, and seeing a man in a gorilla suit, it feels like playing dress up. It feels like there's a man in that suit pretending to be a gorilla, for God's sake. I mean, that's really silly and that's really fun.
You know what's interesting is that I'm always disappointed in the movies where it's revealed that the gorilla-suited man is a gorilla-suited man.
I agree.
Isn't that interesting? There's
Yeah.
like, oh, no, but I want it to be a real gorilla within the reality of the movie.
Yeah, and I think there is some, I mean, it sounds silly, but there does feel like some sort of betrayal because, like, you've given the movie the suspension of your disbelief. You're like, you know what, I'm going to have fun with this movie. I'm going to pretend that is a gorilla. Mm-hmm. And apes also are our closest relatives in the animal kingdom, I've been told. So there's already sort of something uncanny when you go to the zoo and you see apes. They act kind of like humans.
Yes.
And there's that bit of recognition there. So that's weird.
Why are they in a cage?
So these movies tap into that by having the gorillas act, like gorillas. But then the fact that it's also a man in a gorilla suit adds to the uncanny quality. Mm-hmm. Like, gorillas are already uncanny. A man in a gorilla suit is uncanny. Movies are uncanny.
The man in a gorilla suit in movies, especially like old-timey black and white films, it's almost like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. This is for the real fans. Like, this is what you like. It's about the magic of the movies, and it's just about performance and just buying into stuff. I just love it so much. Brings a smile on my face.
And also, there was like a second generation of filmmakers, people like John Landis, who made Schlock.
Joe Dante.
Yeah, who would put men in gorilla suits in their films. Ray Dennis Steckler, who we did a podcast about, is another example. So, we'll get into the guy that they all employed later, but they're all very consciously, they grew up on those black and white movies, and they all want to recreate that sense of fun, but in a sort of jokey postmodern way.
I also think, though, in those movies that you mentioned, it's done in kind of a loving way, as opposed to like, look at this like joke character, which you sometimes see.
It's more like, remember the fun we used to have as kids. Let's try to recreate that fun.
So we're not going to trace a long history of the man in the gorilla suit movies, but it started in like the 1920s with the Tarzan films, where that's where you really have the men in gorilla suits making their first major appearance. And then it continues and got so popular at a certain point in like the 40s and 50s, to the point that one of those Universal horror collections, one of them is just only gorilla movies, because there were so many that you could get into.
We should talk about some of the great gorilla suit actors, because many of these people were employed consistently in movie after movie after movie because they owned their own gorilla suit.
Yes. So when you hired somebody like Charles Gamora, you were hiring him because he had a good suit, he could perform in it, didn't complain, so you knew he could do it.
Who is Charles Gamora, you may ask? Well, he was the man in the gorilla suit in such films as Africa Screams, starring Abbott and Costello.
Mm-hmm. Recently released in a remastered Blu-ray.
Some other famous gorilla suit actors, we'll get to the big one in a sec, but there's Emil Van Horn. You've seen him in 1941's Jungle Girl. You've seen him in 1943's The Ape Man with Bela Lugosi.
And he was known for having like a shitty gorilla suit, like taken off the rack Halloween one, but he was such a strong performer that people liked using him in their pictures. He's probably pretty cheap too.
I mean, his death scene in The Ape Man, how can you not cry?
The William Bodine, Bela Lugosi film.
It's like Dino De Laurentiis said about his King Kong, when Jaws die, nobody cry, but when Emil Van Horn die in The Ape Man, everybody cry.
You also have more of a late period guy, but George Barrows was a gorilla suit guy.
Well, he's great. I love George Barrows because he was in Gorilla at Large, which you watched this week.
I did. Great gorilla suit.
Yeah, I saw Gorilla at Large some years ago at Toronto's dearly departed Trash Palace.
Rest in power.
Saw it on probably 16 millimeter film.
Yes, it was probably red, full screen, TV print.
But listen, George Barrows has a place in history as having played Roman in 1953's classic Robot Monster.
And you can really enjoy his performance as the camera captures him from very far away as Roman slowly walks.
We should pause on this for a second because some people may not know what Robot Monster is. It is a film in which the villain is a space alien who is depicted as a gorilla with a diving helmet, because the director of the film, Phil Tucker, he had access to George Barrows, but he clearly decided, well, the alien can't just be a gorilla. He's got to have a diving helmet,
And
too.
it does not have the awesome skull that you see on the poster for Robot Monster.
For more, check out our Phil Tucker episode.
And finally, we are coming to probably the creme de la creme of gorilla suit actors. That during this period, he is the first name that most cinephiles associate with the gorilla suit
Most
performer.
cinephiles.
Okay, I'm sorry. All cinephiles associate with
That's
him.
right.
It's Ray Crash Corrigan.
Now, Ray Crash Corrigan had a rich Hollywood career. He was a star in westerns. He played henchmen in all sorts of movies. He starred in serials, I believe Undersea Kingdom.
What's funny is that his nickname Crash is not even from being in the movies. It's actually from his football career where he picked it up.
But he also had a gorilla suit, and so
A good one, too.
yeah. I mean, I think he's just the generally accepted best gorilla.
Even though that I saw an interview with Bob Burns in a documentary that we both watched, Men in Suits, and they mentioned that Crash wasn't someone that like would mimic a gorilla very specifically, but he was great at like pounding his chest and acting kind of like the aggressive gorilla.
Well, I was watching that documentary very compelled at what they said about the art and craft of gorilla acting.
Well, I was going to say that like suit performing though is very important, and that like the different person in the suit can bring a completely different personality to the monsters, which you may not associate because you're like, well, anybody can do that, right? Just wave their arms in the air. That's not so hard.
I found that documentary called Men in Suits a little defensive in a way that I found a touch off-putting.
Well, I think that it was mostly from the performers themselves when they were talking about that they were a disposable commodity in the eyes of most productions.
They all kept saying over and over again, you know, it's real acting.
Yes.
You know, people think it's not real acting.
But they even say that, like, they, for a while, didn't hire suit performers. They would just put a stuntman in the suit, and that would be that. And, like, you wouldn't use somebody like Tom Woodruff Jr., who's always played the alien. You just get some other dude to do
Well,
it.
it was very interesting hearing Bob Burns talk about his own gorilla suit acting. Bob Burns is a Hollywood character, a collector, a self-described monster kid, a second-generation gorilla suit actor. He acted on a TV show called The Ghostbusters, as well as in the Ray Dennis Steckler films. And he, in the documentary, says that, you know, he would watch those man in gorilla suit movies growing up, and he decided he wanted to be a man in a gorilla suit.
And unfortunately, Bob Burns was at a period that the movies were not hungry for gorilla-suited actors, but you know what was? Television. Yeah. For like a stretch, if there was a gorilla that appeared on like a talk show, that was Bob Burns in his gorilla suit.
That's right. And he talks in that documentary quite well about how it's all in the eyes. You know, like Bob Burns' eyes were visible in the suit. Like Buster Keaton, he would do so much with those eyes that people would swear, I thought I saw that gorilla's eyes or a brow furrow.
Mm-hmm. And they're like, nope, that is a static face. Maybe the mouse moves. But it also depends on how the gorilla is kind of molded, right? Because you get different looking ones. Like we mentioned Charles Gamora, he had a very kind of like long face gorilla suit. I'm a big fan of like the little eyes ones. Like that Ray's Crash Corrigan suit was kind of like that, which you see in you know, the Important Cinema Club, the cinematic classic Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn gorilla, because that's him in that one.
Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn gorilla. I mean, there's a lot of competition, but that may be my favorite gorilla suit movie. I especially like the scene, you know, there's a plot in that movie for people who don't know that film, and how could you not? That's a movie that stars a Martin and Lewis ripoff duo called Duke Mitchell and Sammy Petrillo. And halfway through the movie, Bela Lugosi turns Duke Mitchell into a gorilla, and has one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema when Duke, as the gorilla, is trying to convince Sammy that he's Duke, and he starts singing his trademark theme song, but he does it in a gorilla voice.
Do you think Ray Crash was doing that?
I was wondering that this week.
You know what? Somebody like Tom Weaver would know something like that.
But hey, let's get back to Ray Crash Corrigan, because he is, you know, the Olivier of gorilla suit actors. Mm-hmm. I think we both sampled his work this week. We both watched a 1940 Poverty Row classic called The Ape, starring Boris Karloff. And it's one of Boris Karloff's sillier movies, one of his more impoverished movies. Boris Karloff plays a seemingly kindly doctor who wants to cure polio. And he's got this girl that he's working on, thinks he can cure her polio, make her walk, but what he needs is fluid from the spinal columns of human beings.
Now, this is a film that is fairly dry. I was shocked to see it was made in 1940 because it has that white zombie airlessness to it, like no music. And looking at the director's credits, it's all Poverty Row stuff, like Charlie Chan Mysteries and things like that.
Yeah, his name is William Nye, and I mean, he made a lot of stuff with Boris Karloff, a lot of the Mr. Wong
That's
series.
what I was thinking of, the Mr. Wong series.
He also made one of Bela Lugosi's worst movies, Black Dragons. But I mean, he was a guy who started in the silent era. So like he was in Charlie Chaplin movies, like the really early ones as an actor.
So he was a guy that just kind of hung around, William Bodine-ish, and you feel his heart's not that in it, but anytime the gorilla shows up in this movie, the movie takes off.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a gorilla who's going around killing people, and then in the shocking twist, you find out that the gorilla was Boris Karloff in a suit all along.
Boo.
Disappointing. But I don't know, I kind of like this. I like this a bit more than you do.
I react like a child to these movies when they reveal that it's a human inside. It's like, no, don't give me that Scooby-Doo ending.
I thought the movie was paced reasonably well, and
Isn't it like only like an hour, 70 minutes?
It's 62 minutes.
Yeah. A lot of like Boris Karloff being a scientist stuff and trying to prove his theories.
Boris Karloff seems so old in this, doesn't he?
He does.
But there's more gorilla than there is in a lot of the movies we watch this week.
That's right, because we also checked out stuff like the Edward Dmytryk film, Captured Wild Women.
Yes, so that is a lesser Universal horror movie. It was a B movie from the 1940s, and this one stars John Carradine as a mad scientist who believes that he can transform a female gorilla into a human woman. But to do this requires killing an actual human woman. But he does that. And I mean, that's basically the plot. There's some shenanigans with the circus.
Yeah, all these like gorilla films often, especially the Universal ones, have circus related plots because like where else are you going to find a gorilla? That's where it would be, in a cage.
Oh, it's so talky. So these Universal B movies from the 40s, I actually kind of like. I don't know if I can defend this, but I like them right now a little bit less than I like some of the Poverty Row horror movies.
I agree with you.
Which I'm not saying the Poverty Row ones aren't boring, because they are.
But they have their own atmosphere
Yeah.
that the Universal ones don't have because there's, you know, a well-oiled machine behind them. It's the difference between something being kind of like weird because it didn't have the money and something on rails, which is more boring to watch.
Exactly. I also revisited a classic film written by Edward D. Wood Jr. called The Bride and the Beast. And this one, again, stars Ray Crash Corrigan
I mean, it has to. They're all crash joints.
in one of his finest performances, I would say. This is the story of a couple who are honeymooning, and on their honeymoon, the woman, played by Charlotte Austin, sees a gorilla in a cage, played by Ray Crash Corrigan, and she feels a strange attraction to this gorilla. And the two of them, they reach their hands out at each other, and there's an understanding between the two of them. And as the film goes on, we find out that Charlotte Austin was once a gorilla in a previous life, and that's why she has this sexual attraction
I've
to
never
gorillas.
seen this movie. So it sounds like there's a lot of gorilla content in it.
There's more than the usual amount of gorilla content. It ends with the gorilla triumphantly carrying Charlotte Austin across the threshold into the cave.
Oh, no.
Presumably to have sex with her. And I mean, this movie, Ed Wood didn't direct it. He just wrote it. I think it would be better if Ed Wood directed it. It's a little slow. It's a little talky at times. But what I love, one of the many things I love about Ed Wood is his interest in going to that weird territory, the sexual boundaries, sexual aberrations. I definitely sense that his heart was in this.
I mean, when you talk about the appearance of gorillas in Poverty Row films, I think they were so prevalent because they were such a cheap special effect. You hired the guy that had the suit. Like, you didn't have to get a makeup designer to spend 7 hours like Jack Pierce, like doing the Frankenstein makeup on Karloff every day. You just had a dude. He was in a hairy suit. He sweated throughout the day, but he did it because he was used to it. So that's why they appear over and over and over again in all of these films.
We did want to check out a modern-ish gorilla suit movie to see how the art and craft had evolved. So we decided to revisit 1995's Congo.
And so Congo was a movie that I recalled seeing as a kid, and I remember not liking it. And I came back to it today going, you know what? Maybe I didn't know what I was talking about.
We've got galaxy brains now because we can appreciate men in gorilla suits.
Or even women in gorilla suits, which is the case with this one.
How about the cast of this movie?
So good.
You got Tim Curry, you got Joe Don Baker, you got Ernie Hudson, you got Bruce Campbell, tons, Joe Pantaleone.
Showing up very briefly in one scene.
Many others that
John
I'm forgetting.
Hawkes showing up for 10 seconds before dying of gorilla-induced terror.
My God, Laura Linney is one of the leads.
And this film is so boring. It bummed me out. Like, Frank Marshall just asleep at the switch, and what is clearly supposed to be a throwback to the, very colonialist, racist movies of jungle adventure stuff.
Frank Marshall produced the Indiana Jones movies, and it's trying to do a little bit of that, a little bit of Jurassic Park, but yeah, doing it for jungle adventure.
Like, you didn't even mention the name of the lead, because who cares? He sucks.
Yeah, it's Dylan something or other. Yeah, he really does suck. And I don't know. I didn't hate the movie. I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, you wouldn't watch it again.
I might
you
have
wouldn't
said that
recommend it.
too quickly. I just want to emphasize I did not enjoy this film.
Even though, like, every scene, I was sitting there, like, arms crossed, being like, I should like this.
Well,
Why do I like this?
I had the exact same feeling because the movie, which is written by John Patrick Shanley, the Pulitzer-winning playwright.
Based on the Michael Crichton novel, the climate denialist himself.
But everybody involved are very smart people, and clearly they got together and wanted to do kind of a camp thing. They wanted to have fun, and every scene has those camp elements in place. When Tim Curry shows up for the first time,
Doing a Borat voice,
and he's playing the Peter Lorre role basically. And when Jodan Baker shows up, and he is such a ham.
I mean, everyone's trying to ham themselves off the screen.
I mean, Ernie Hudson has a British accent, and he's kind of suave. He's kind of Clark Gable-ish. Yeah, I love that. Every scene looks like it should be fun, but it just moves at such a dreary pace. Yeah.
And even when, like, the action set pieces happen, it's just like uncommitted, very TV-like is what I felt.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate Spielberg more, doesn't it? You know, Raiders of the Lost Ark has so much more of a pulse.
Which is weird because Frank Marshall did a big Spielberg imitation in Arachnophobia, and I guess after, I don't think that was a big success. He's like, all right, just gonna phone it in now, not gonna try too hard.
Yeah.
So what about the gorilla in this movie, though?
Well, the gorilla's name is Amy, played by a gymnast named Misty Rosas, who I learned in the documentary took training from John Alexander, who played one of the main gorillas in Gorillas in the Mist, which we did not watch this week because it looked boring.
Will said, "Can we please watch something else?" I'm like, "How about Congo?" He's like, "Yeah, that'll be fun." No, not really.
Probably still more fun than Gorillas in the Mist. But yeah, Amy in the movie, modeled, I think, after Coco, the famous talking gorilla.
Yeah.
Amy, talks through some sort of a program in a very rudimentary way. Also drinks a
martini at one point.
Yeah.
I like that. I like all that stuff. I don't know. Too realistic for me.
Yes, okay. I couldn't agree more. It is too realistic. It's too realistic, but it's also not realistic enough.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
but what would be realistic enough, though, right? Like,
well, I don't know.
You want some stylization to your gorilla.
I kind of like in the recent Planet of the Apes movies, the way that it's that Andy Serkis motion capture, because Andy Serkis, through the motion capture, is able to actually give sort of a performance.
With the help of the special effects artists.
Right. With a lot of help.
Yeah.
But, you're able to see him kind of act. And you don't get to see Misty Rosas act in the same way. And there's also not that fun disconnect of the fact that it looks fake.
Yeah, because there's like all the servos and their mouths moving and stuff like, and like eyes blinking. You would accept that it's a real gorilla from a distance. I think it could still work.
I think I accepted it when I was a kid.
And I mean, I really like the evil gorillas that show up, but not enough of them.
I also think that final action set piece is disappointing.
Super disappointing. I remember being disappointed as a child where I was like, I don't know what's going on. Why is the volcano erupting? How come a character has a laser now?
Should be fun, though. A lot of gorillas.
Big set.
Yeah.
Like, characters, you know what? It almost feels like they were going to do an R rating and they cut it down to a PG-13 and they lost a lot of the good stuff. Like, Tim Curry's killed off screen.
You can kind of tell because they do some of that, like, slow motion stuff, which is clearly a way to extend the scene in a way. Yeah.
But yeah, disappointing all around. And will there be a return to the gorilla-suited performer?
I mean, no.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah. They'll be back. We'll love it. I mean, they keep trying, right? They keep trying to recapture that magic. Like, just look at something like Dwayne Johnson's Rampage. He has a gorilla friend in that one, too.
Yeah, but it's not a guy in a suit.
No, it's not a guy in a suit. It's not the same.
It's CGI.
I know, but they can't realize that what people want is a guy in a suit.
I mean, we've been saying it for years. The silent majority is with us. We want men in gorilla suits.
And, we mentioned Bob Burns in passing. If anybody wants to see one of his great gorilla performances, check him out as the main gorilla in the Ghostbusters live-action TV show.
From the 60s.
Yes, not the real Ghostbusters, as the cartoon called itself. It's the Ghostbusters, where they, like, ride around in a jalopy, and, like, one of them has, like, one of those pinwheels on his head.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a gorilla in every episode. So, as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first letter is from Alexander Roth. And it goes, Daffy versus Donald. Hey guys, Will, is Whit Stillman right? Is Donald Duck better than Daffy? Donald Duck might have been a Nazi in a dream, but at least he never made Space Jam 2. Ooh.
Well, hang on. That's not Daffy's fault.
Yeah.
Daffy's an employee of the studio.
A movie that you, Will Sloan, said was running for the worst movie ever made.
Boy, those are harsh words, aren't they? And I stand by them.
I have some movies to show you, Will. I know it can be hard to admit defeat, but try to be a bigger man after you dried your tears.
I could name you 10 classic Daffy Duck cartoons right now. Yeah. I could maybe name like one Donald Duck cartoon, and it's Der Fuhrer's face.
Can I play the devil's advocate here? That Donald is really popular in Europe in a way that he is not here.
Oh, he's a genius in France.
That's right,
saying.
like Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
And you do love Jerry Lewis,
That's
don't
true.
you? Like, did you ever read the Karl Barks comics?
No.
Yeah, me neither. And in the cartoons, like DuckTales, Daffy was minimized because Disney had a rule that their core characters couldn't do stuff in, like, TV shows and stuff like that. So Scrooge got all the fun. But in the comics, Donald was a figure that did all the adventure stuff, blah, blah, blah. And to that I say, Daffy is still better because he's pathetic and much funnier.
Daffy is way funnier, and Donald's voice is really annoying.
But isn't Donald like the blue collar guy? He's the one that gets to like be angry. That is his, I feel, trademark thing, right? Where he's like,
what the hell are you talking about? He's part of the McDuck fortune.
Yes, that's true. But his uncle gives him not a penny for his work. He'll take care of his nephews, but that's it.
I mean, if you want a funny duck who's angry, I got
Daffy
Daffy for you.
Woo, 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 woo. I can't do the Daffy Duck.
Woohoo, woohoo, woohoo.
Yeah, there you go. Will's got it down pat. Yeah, Daffy is clearly the better character. Like, come on. Like, that's not even a contest.
There's a lot of stuff that Whit Stillman has said over the years that I disagree with.
Yes.
Although his hardcore defense of Woody Allen.
Does he have a hardcore defense of Woody Allen?
Oh, yeah, he's a huge Woody guy. He's pro Woody.
Boy. But yeah, Daffy forever. Just watch Looney Tunes back in action to really get that pure Daffy. Watch Duck Amuck. Show me one cartoon that's better that Donald made than Duck Amuck.
Or any character, frankly.
Yeah. And not only is Duck Amuck the best cartoon, but it is a perfect representation of Daffy as a character in my favorite form. So that's it for letters this week. Thank you very much for sending us one. And if you're listening and you have a question or comment for us, send it at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. What are we doing on our Patreon this week, Will?
Well, speaking of Daffy Duck, we are revisiting one of our favorite films of the century. We saw Space Jam 2 recently, and that inspired us to want to give another look to Joe Dante's Looney Tunes Back in Action.
I asked Will last week, hey, you want to do an episode on Space Jam 2? And like every podcaster in the world, he's like, I already booked, already got my Space Jam 2 episode. It's grist for the mill.
That's right.
So I said, you know what? I want to watch Joe Dante's Looney Tunes Back in Action. Both of us like it, so it's a chance to talk about it for 30 minutes. So check it out at patreon.com/theimportantcinemaclub. And if you're listening to this on the Thursday when this is released, I just want to remind you that Gold Ninja Video is doing a telethon for the Indiegogo that I am running. And the telethon will probably be about 14 hours, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to play movies. We're going to have more guests than any streaming thing that I've ever had.
So it's going to be, I'm a layman here. Mr. DeClue, I have some questions about the telethon.
problem.
So first of all, what is your Indiegogo campaign?
My Indiegogo campaign is to raise funds to do scans of prints that I will then release on Blu-ray, which at this point include a Poverty Row Western, a Bruceploitation film, and a few other things that are within the stretch goal, because we already made the original goal that I had for a bunch of movies. You can find the names on the Indiegogo page, include Skip Tracer and Moturn Media and Shock Marathon Classic, Freaky Farley, but we could do more.
So, Mr. DeClue, you're telling me that we're going to get a Bruce Lee imitator film, a Bruceploitation film, if you will.
Indeed.
That's never been released in widescreen.
Never in widescreen.
Okay,
yes.
well, we need people to donate for that.
Yeah.
A Western that does not exist in high def anywhere, and that features, I'm just going to say, an Important Cinema Club favorite behind the camera.
We have talked about this Western
Yes.
on the show.
So
Yes.
you can go scavenger hunting. I'm also going to say...
Don't give too much away.
I'm not going to give any more away. So, Mr. I'm just so excited.
Isn't it crazy that like we can do this movie and that no one has released it in high definition?
I'm so excited. And then, Mr. DeClue, you're telling me that if we get to the extreme stretch goal, like we can get a scanner ourselves.
Yes, we can get a scanner, which will allow me to do this much more often and to do more scans because it would just involve buying or borrowing the prints that I would then scan instead of the, $4,000 it costs to do it through a lab.
Incredible forgotten corners of film history that you, sir, are preserving. So you've got this telethon coming up, just like Jerry Lewis before you.
Yes.
And it's on Twitch, and it runs for like 14 hours, and you're showing movies.
Yep, they're all kind of like Golden Ninja Video adjacent movies, including a screening of The Revenge of Samson, which is a film I subtitled myself. Does not exist anywhere with English subtitles. I found a French dubbed widescreen print of this Indonesian Conan the Barbarian, very gory film. I subtitled it and it will be playing during this stream.
And you have special guests, you said.
Yes, I do.
Am I going to be there?
Yeah, you will be there. We
Whoa.
will play Jackie Chan games.
We will play Jackie Chan games.
That's right.
Well, folks, if you've ever wanted to see me play a video game, you will.
There you go. And obviously, that's what people are hungering for these days.
People love it on Twitch.
We're going to have all our favorite guests. Will Matt and Charlie show up? Of course they will. They got it. It's legally obliged, and we love seeing those guys. Will we also have a live video commentary with the No Such Thing as a Bad Movie crew? Yes, Over Parole Violators, a great film, especially one to just kind of talk over because it's mostly long action scenes with repetitive musical loops that play.
Well, what's important to remember is this is a telethon, and
Yes.
you should donate generously.
Sell your worldly goods that you have. Only keep the things you need to survive and then give me the money. Contribute that money. You don't need, there's great perks. You can get all the out-of-print Gold Ninja Video stuff. You can also buy a subscription for the next 6 titles, but you don't need to do that. You can just drop a couple thousand just right in there as a contribution.
Mr. DeClue, when you put out your copy of The Dragon Lives Again, the very first Gold Ninja Video release, which sold out in 2 days.
Yes.
I didn't even know about Gold Ninja at the time. I couldn't get a copy. I couldn't listen to the great commentary by you and me.
Yes, that's true.
But if I donate to the Kickstarter, could I have another chance of getting that?
Yes, this will be the last time as well.
Last
No
time,
more
okay.
of this, because every time I put The Dragon Lives out, I'm like, a company has to release this at some point. Nobody has stepped up yet, so...
This is it, folks. Yeah. So anyway, this is what I was saying. And sorry, the date and time again?
It is on July 31st, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's going to be happening at twitch.tv/Important Cinema Club.
So check that out in the show notes too, I assume.
Yes, there will be a link right there for you to click, as well as just to click and then put in your payment information and know that we will be saving movies that... Oh my God.
No one is doing this.
No one is doing this. Me and Will were just talking about another one that I haven't even mentioned that could be on the schedule, and
God.
it is wild.
I'm genuinely excited, folks. I don't endorse things that I'm not excited for, folks.
But here you go. He is endorsing the Gold Ninja Video. So, what are we doing next week, Will?
Well, from the ridiculous to the sublime.
And the racist.
And the racist. One thing that we like almost as much as gorilla suits is the wind in the trees. One of the classic things that makes cinema an art form. So we are going all the way back to cinema's birth and finally talking about the father of cinema, for God's sake, D.W. Griffith.
Yep, that's right. We'll be talking about intolerance. Will we learn that racism is bad from the man who made Birth of a Nation?
And we will also be talking about his final directorial effort, Abraham Lincoln.
So I was very surprised that one of us has not seen Intolerance.
Yes, this is incredibly embarrassing. In my top 5 biggest blind spots, maybe my number 1 biggest blind spot, frankly, Intolerance.
So that's what we'll be watching next week. And until then, my name's Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
Well, I was revisiting some of our favorite auteurs recently. I watched a movie by Roger Corman, and I watched a movie by Jess Franco.
Mm-hmm. Good ones, right?
Well, yeah. So with Roger Corman, I revisited a film that I last saw when I was a teenage boy. Remember, I just said I haven't seen Intolerance, but I've seen this movie twice.
Yes.
It is 1955's Five Guns West, and what is notable about this movie is that it was Roger Corman's directorial debut. He had produced a few movies before that, including a film called The Fast and the Furious. Five Guns West was the first one that he directed, and he shot it in a week. It's a cowboy movie. It's pretty boring.
Yeah, the only interesting thing that is associated with it is that Roger Corman vomited on the side of the road on the first day of filming before he got the set because he was so nervous.
And then by the time it was over, he knew how to direct. And 2 things of note about this film. The cinematographer is Floyd Crosby, David Crosby's father.
Oh.
And what's great about Floyd Crosby is he was another old timer. He shot Taboo, the F.W. Murnau, Robert Flaherty silent film, won an Oscar for it. Mm-hmm. He worked with Orson Welles on the aborted film It's All True. He also shot High Noon, in the early
Wow.
1950s. So pretty good career.
How did he end up shooting for Roger Corman?
I have no idea, but it must have seemed like a come down. But actually, he had a great career out of this going on because obviously Corman worked with a number of different DPs, but Floyd Crosby was his default DP. So
Did he shoot the Poe films?
he shot some of them. He shot The Pit and the Pendulum.
I forgot Nick Rogue shot the most famous one, The Mask of Red Death.
That's right. But Floyd Crosby also shot X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, and a number of other ones that you know and love. So I think that's a pretty great career, frankly. It's like, it must have seemed like slumming, but he ended up directing some of the most beloved exploitation movies of the 60s out of it.
Yeah, that's a great career. And as we always say, cinematographers are the ones that when you look at the entirety of their, working life, there's going to be highs and it's usually going to end in lows because that, cinematographers, as they age, I feel like producers, filmmakers feel they're not in touch anymore with what the young kids, the style that they want.
It's interesting when you look at the 70s cinematographers, like they all start, first of all, directing Rat Finka Boo Boo. And then they get their big break and they're being a cinematographer on like 5 Easy Pieces or Dog Day Afternoon or, one of the big ones. And then in the 80s, they shoot Scrooged, good gig, respectable. And then in the 90s, they're shooting like Whoopi Goldberg movies. And then in the 2000s, sitcoms or like direct-to-video stuff.
But the thing is that and that happened to every cinematographer. Even Carl Freund, didn't he end up shooting I Love Lucy? And he's the one who created the multicam setup.
Well, I mean, that's great that he created it.
Yes,
I mean, not bad. But
he
still,
ended up on sitcoms. Yes, the guy. I mean, he directed The Mummy.
Not those expressionist touches that we knew from his great work. I mean, he basically ghost directed Dracula.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. That may be some Todd Browning slander.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, the other movie I watched recently was Jess Franco's Fall of the Eagle, also known as Night of the Eagle.
Woof.
Yes. When you came over to my house a week or two ago, that was in the stack of movies you brought. And I was like, I already have that.
Yep. And your interest was piqued only because it's like a big budget Jess Franco film and Christopher Lee's in it. And so is Mark Hamill, which is very funny in a very serious World War II film.
Also, a third star, Ramon Estevez, who is the...
Ramon Estevez?
Yes, he's the forgotten Sheen brother. He is Charlie and Emilio's brother.
I mean, it goes Joe, Martin, I guess Ramon.
Yeah, and then Charlie. I was interested to watch this movie because, in the late 60s, Jess Franco was making all of these Harry Allen Towers movies, big-ish budget movies.
Yeah, and they weren't good.
Yeah,
that.
They were boring. But then, in the 70s and 80s, got increasingly impoverished. His movies became increasingly pornographic. Just Lena Romay.
So they got better.
Yeah, Lena Romay being naked in a house. And then in the late 80s, he made Faceless.
Yeah, and that was the big, return to budget.
In that, he had a crew again. And he had a couple of kind of stars in it.
He had more than one lens, other than that one zoom lens on the camera.
And this brought him back. And then he made this World War II movie, which has, I mean, if you told me that Jess Franco didn't direct it, if you told me that some hack made it, I would say sure. And very disappointing. But I mean, every Jess Franco movie will be given a specialty Blu-ray release.
Yes. I mean, I don't think this is a special edition because Full Moon put it out. It's just the movie.
It's bare bones, but I mean, it's beautiful. It's mastered from the negative.
I mean, listen, I have a copy of Dracula, Jess Franco's Christopher Lee Dracula, which is not good.
Boring.
Yeah, but
I would watch it 5 times before I watch Night of the Eagle again.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm glad that we could go into your continued adventures with your favorite auteurs.